Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar in which we'll be discussing ways that we can help support your online or blended learning course with digital tools. I'm Stephanie Cowley from the digital team, and I'm joined by Stuart Webster, our digital solutions manager here at Cengage EMEA. Hi Stuart.
Morning.
But I'd also like to introduce our guest speaker from the University of Portsmouth, Paul Lovejoy. And
hello.
My colleague, hi Paul, and my colleague Chris Lewis. Hi Chris.
Good morning.
A quick housekeeping note, the session lasts about 30 minutes and you can contact us anytime to ask questions. Just go to cengage.co.uk and get in touch. So we're presenting this session to show you a few insights into the tools for online or blended learning. And specifically how they can help with engagement and interactivity, independent learning, online remote testing and exam situations. And we really want to show you how our tools and platforms can save you time so you can focus on the things that really matter. Our digital solution for online or blended learning is called MindTap. You may have heard of MindTap before. But what exactly is it? Stuart, can you help jump in here and tell us what is MindTap?
Sure. MindTap is really, the best way to describe it is as a kind of multi-layered platform that allows you to deliver both content and assessment and engagement in a single place, but is customizable so it reflects the course that you're teaching rather than an out-of-box solution that doesn't really have any relevance to your course. It really is about relevance, but also bringing those teaching tools together.
Thanks so much. And we're now eager to give you the chance to hear from a peer about a real life journey using and integrating the MindTap platform into an established course. So I'm delighted to introduce again Paul Lovejoy from Portsmouth Business School in the UK. Paul is a senior teaching fellow teaching undergraduate students across all subject groups. An experienced MindTap user, and we're really happy that he is here to talk very openly with you about his experiences. And if I may, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Chris Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. I guess firstly, hi Paul, a pleasure to see you again.
Hi Chris.
Albeit virtually, but that's the world that we live in these days.
Yes, indeed.
So let's just have a few questions for you today. It'd just be great to understand about how using MindTap has impacted the course that you're currently teaching and sort of the benefits and how that's came to be.
Okay, thanks Chris. So I've been teaching for about 10 years. I've been at the university for the last 8. And I first came across MindTap in the context of a first-year macroeconomics course that I'm part of the teaching team for. There we're working with specialist economists on a BSc program, and in a desire to improve student engagement beyond the traditional lectures and seminars that we were running in the old physical world, we took a decision to adopt MindTap as a complement to the Cengage product, the book that we had already adopted. So that led us into starting to explore the functions that were available in MindTap, the way in which we could make resources available to suit a particular topic that was being studied. And I started to experiment with the particular notion of deep links, the idea of identifying specific individual resources in the MindTap system, and then attaching that to a particular point in the learning path. So we were kind of guiding students through which individual elements to study next. That will all become clearer when we look at a real example. But anyway, having had exposure to how MindTap worked from about 2017 in that program, I began to think about how I could apply it in a module that I'm responsible for, which runs for really all of the business school students who are not specialist economists and specialist lawyers. So typically about 600 students a year, variable levels of engagement, often having never studied economics before, and a group of students who I felt would benefit from being given a number of ways into the subject that complemented the materials we already had.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess that sort of leads us up to what happened about a year ago when the COVID-19 challenge hit us all. So I guess what sort of challenges did that present on? How did you overcome that by using MindTap as the digital platform and the goals that you wanted to achieve?
Okay, well, my university decided to implement a screeching handbrake turn over one weekend in the middle of March, and we switched overnight from the traditional world of face-to-face lectures and seminars to what was initially 100% online. And so in that kind of emergency situation, we made a few running changes to adapt our existing material. We use Moodle as our interface, and I had been assembling a variety of resources to try and stimulate students beyond the traditional lectures and seminar materials. And in that short term, we cobbled together a solution which actually worked okay. It got us through the last 6 or so weeks of teaching and through the end of module assessment period for that year. As we drew breath over the summer, with the increasing likelihood that the academic year 2020-21 would include, at least in part, a continuation of online work, and in particular, a view that we adopted quickly, which was that large lectures were out, that any online, any face-to-face contact would be small group seminars, and we needed to do something to replace what had been large lectures. I saw the opportunity to adopt a new tool, and the university, which had been somewhat reluctant to make significant investments in new online resources, recognized the opportunity, invited module coordinators such as myself to put forward their preferred publisher platform if they wanted to use one, and didn't impose a one-size-fits-all solution. So we were able to choose, as long as we could make a case for it, the best resource that we felt was available. And of the alternatives on offer, I decided that the Cengage MindTap product was the best option for this group.
Brilliant, thank you. And so I guess you kind of mentioned previously is that obviously the driving force for using MindTap is that a main motive is that the university doesn't really take a one-size-fits-all approach. So are you able to sort of expound on that?
Yes. So first of all, in context, my large economics module for 600 or so students is cited within what we call a common first year, where there are essentially 6 modules from different subject groups across the university. And it was in that context that I was able to make a choice. I went for the Cengage MindTap option really for 2 reasons. First of all, I like the base material. It is the book that I had wanted to adopt and was my preferred source, had been for several years, but I've been constrained in being able to resource that. Secondly, having been familiar with the way in which MindTap worked, I liked its functions. I saw the opportunity to have some interoperability, if you like, with my colleagues who were using Cengage and MindTap on the BSc program, 150 students, and it seemed to me to be a sensible bit of resilience to make sure that we had a similar resource being used, especially since it was one that was flexible, that I was familiar with, and supported good content. And so we went through the process of assembling a business case. Most of my colleagues running other modules actually decided to go with another solution, and we were able to demonstrate that through our experience with MindTap on other modules, this was the right solution for us.
Brilliant, thank you. And so if you could sort of key out, what would you say is the main driving force for using MindTap?
So I like the flexibility. I mean, as we'll see, one way you can set up MindTap is to have a complete course available for students simply to click through, by accessing Cengage as a platform. And some students do that. Other students learn in a variety of different ways, and I think the last year or so has reminded us of the importance of being flexible in accommodating a variety of learning approaches and learning stimuli. So the opportunity that the Deep Links presented me with was to make individual resources available in a form that suggested a learning path for students who wanted to follow that through. There was a kind of stepping stones approach that they could follow, but equally students could dip in to individual resources as they preferred. So for example, a student that had studied the subject before might just use resources relating to particular aspects of the topic that were new to them, or maybe an occasional progress test just to check that they did understand as much as they thought they understood. And so that combination of an immersive, complete solution coupled with the flexibility for students to dip in and dip out as their own preferences dictated was really what drove the decision.
Brilliant, thank you. And so I guess really obviously you've been using it during this COVID-19 crisis. Do you think that the intended role of using MindTap has changed as a result of the pandemic?
Certainly. I'll try and answer that by thinking about in two time spans. First of all, what happens after the pandemic? Will there be a time after the pandemic? I don't think we're ever going to return to what normal used to look like in universities. So I think that some of the techniques that we've developed here will continue to be used. We've seen real value in using individual resources to prompt student engagement between seminars, to find other ways of imparting information that move beyond, and perhaps in some respects are better than the traditional model of someone standing at the front of a large room with several hundred students sitting there listening on a rainy Wednesday morning at a particular time. So that's the long term. As we've gone this year, I mean, my overall observation would be that our initial plan has worked. We're seeing good levels of engagement with the resources that we provided. Not perfect, but generally the levels of engagement that I can track by looking at diagnostics are significantly better than in previous years. And I think as the year has gone on, we've tended to consolidate more around the core MindTap resources, whereas initially we were kind of adding in other resources from other directions as well. What we've tended to do is to focus back down on the core set of materials that's provided by MindTap and augment those with our own video recordings that essentially use those same materials again.
Brilliant, thank you. So obviously you mentioned about what you really found useful was the deep linking and the flexibility for the students. Are you able to sort of elaborate on that and guess sort of how that sort of helped you at the University of Portsmouth, show how you really made use of the MindTap using the deep linkings, how that looks, and sort of that process of actually deep linking the MindTap into the course?
Okay. Should we have a look at an example?
What is the LMS that you use at the University of Portsmouth?
So we're using Moodle, and let me just make sure that I can share that screen. So yes, we've used Moodle for many years, and it has particular characteristics. We're not about to change that system, so we work around its foibles. So what I'm showing you here is an extract from a Moodle page. Essentially, every student who is registered on the university is granted access to the Moodle page, and any student who has access to Moodle is able to access any of the resources that I'm showing you. So first of all, we've got a standard layout for the week. In purple, our weekly introduction and tasks is basically what replaces what would have been a traditional lecture. So a series of short videos, a brief bit of context from me, and then the colleague who was actually responsible for the video lectures, then providing a series of short bite-sized introductions to, well, we're looking at demand and supply here. And then we also provided the slides that we had used in the presentations. Now, here's where we start to use deep linking. I've identified individual elements in the MindTap resources for that week. So I started by assuming that it would be good to get students to start off by listening to a 2-minute summary of the chapter. Okay, so that clicking here will take you straight to that. We've then got some brief videos. At this stage, we were using, we were folding in short videos from another source which were compatible. So I guess there's an opportunity. We're mixing, you know, a MindTap resource with another resource. Then the reading. We decided that it would be helpful to break the reading up into short sections rather than just giving them a chapter at a time, which can be intimidating, to try and break up the process. So here's basically the flow. Here's a bit of sort of stimulation to get into the topic. Now do some reading. And before you go on, a quick practice test. So we had set up a succession of short tests, which usually comprise no more than 2 or 3 questions selected from a much larger question bank that MindTap provides. And those are non-assessed. You can take them as many times as you like to go through it. And the idea is that by working through those, you can check that you've understood what you should have just been reading about. Repeat the process again, because doing all of that in one go would be too much of a chunk. So another bite-size chunk on, now we're looking at the demand side of our model. Another short practice quiz. And that's their work on what would replace a normal lecture that week. Of course, we then have a seminar. And for the first 6 weeks of the current academic year, those were face-to-face. Since then, they've been online. So we've got a fairly conventional set of materials for the seminar, which would pick up the topic covered in the previous week's lectures. So these were questions drawn again from the book source. And then once we completed a complete cycle of seminars, we made the solutions available. And then finally, to try and get students to prepare for the following week, we'd included a lead on to an activity. In this case, it was going back over something that we regarded as particularly important, but very often we would have a link to a mini case study to sort of warm students up for the following week's seminar. So that's what they would see. Because I'm showing this in my role as instructor, you can also then see things that students can't see. So first of all, here's a bunch of resources that my colleague could draw on if he wanted to. Secondly, now the students can't see these, but these are the individual deep links that I've created in order to drive those multicolour sections that we got up in Moodle. So I've gone through the process of creating each of these as a resource. They're hidden from the student, and effectively that's what is triggered when the student clicks on one of those.
Brilliant, thank you. It just looks so neatly laid out, and also we've seen that those where you do actually have deep links integrated into the learning management system is we definitely see students engage with it a lot more, and we've certainly seen that on your course.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I mention as well, you tend to use it at the midterm feedback?
Yes. Yep. So we conducted a a review of, inviting comments from students. Again, it had to be online this year at the mid-year point. We were keen to get feedback. I mean, the basic format of that is normally for us, what's gone well, what's gone not so well, what would you like to change, that sort of format, with a scope for students to then provide free text elaborations. We had very positive comments on the materials, on the step-by-step learning path. So just to remind you, that's this bit here. So our idea of breaking up the learning journey went down very well. We had positive comments about the book. That's very unusual. And I think that's related to us breaking down the reading into short bite-sized chunks. So I think one of the things that's drawn us into doing is to find a way of helping students avoid having to look at a finished diagram in a book, scratching their heads trying to figure out which line went where and what order they build it, because there are so many other resources to see how these diagrams are built. By the time they see one in the book, they're kind of familiar with them. So those were all the positive comments. The only negative comment that came back was not to do with MindTap at all. It was to do with the way in which we provided our own lecture recordings to replace the traditional lectures. And basically what students were saying was they wanted to see more of us doing the recordings. But the feedback on the MindTap material and the way in which it had been implemented was overwhelmingly positive, which is a significant advance on previous years for us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. That's all really good to hear. So I guess for those that are potentially looking at using MindTap for the first time, there is a lot of information and a lot of functionality that can be done, and it can be quite overwhelming for people when they first look at the MindTap. So is there any sort of tips that you would share for somebody who's using it for the first time?
Yes. So my first tip would be use the summer wisely. It is definitely worth investing time preparing in advance. I'll perhaps let me move around this screen to show you how I went about the process. So if we come up to here, and I click on this Cengage link here, this is an alternative way that students can access the resources. But this takes us to the whole, if you like, the whole sideboard full of materials that we've broken down in those individual links before. So if I just click here, and we're loading the resource. Okay, so over here on the left-hand side is basically the entire course. We could simply download the entire set of resources from MindTap, but we tweaked them. I'll show you that by clicking on the Hiddens. So let's go through here. We can see that we used some resources here, the first two chapters, but we didn't use the third chapter. We decided that that material was covered in another course. So we worked through here and we set up our which chapters we were going to use, which resources we were going to use. If I click on this one here as an example, then you can see that some resources are taken out of use. So we've got the reading being used, but not in this case, the audio summary. When it comes to assessment, so I could have given students access to the entire set of 20 revision questions. I thought that was overwhelming. So we've taken those out, and in place, we've created progress tests, short bite-sized ones to work through, which can be repeated. Decided not to use case studies there. So I guess my first point is think about, excuse me, the course that you'll be delivering over the following weeks or the year, and set your course up. You can make changes once you've done it, but it's worth getting this course set up in its entirety, before you start then building the links.
Yeah.
If I show you what else we've done here, so a significant part of our assessment is based on using online tests, and again we set those up to start off with. So here I've got all my 8 online tests set up before the start of the year. I've vetted the questions, I've decided the topics to be covered, all set up to be triggered automatically within the MindTap resource, and you can see high levels of usage subsequently. So I guess my first point is do all of that before you start thinking about setting up the material on Moodle. Next tip, I guess is fairly obvious for any teacher or instructor, but think hard about your students. What kind of students are they? What do they know about the subject? What proportion of your students will have studied this topic before? How will you accommodate the difference between those students who are coming to the subject new and who will need a lot of support in the early stages in particular, and on the other hand, those students who have studied the subject before and who might trip into complacency, assuming that they know more than they actually do. So thinking about that led me into developing the stepping stones approach. And I think thirdly, particularly think about what we need to do to secure engagement in the particular environment we're going to be in. I assumed when preparing this year's work that we were never going to have a full face-to-face physical experience, and that there was a good chance of the lockdowns that indeed have subsequently happened actually occurring. So I wanted to make sure I was resilient to potentially a world of 100% online, and I felt I could always pull back from that. I found it was easier to go from online to face-to-face than to go from face-to-face to online.
Brilliant, yeah, thank you. And I think really from everything you kind of said there, from all of those top tips to be able to put that MindTap course together, it's all helped because obviously the feedback that you got from the students was very positive, and we can see that they were engaging with it as well. So that time that you took to creating and restricting the content or handpicking the activities and so on, we can see that it really worked. So I guess being sort of quite candid is obviously, some people will obviously feel with using a digital platform, it is technology and it works great, but sometimes people can be a bit hesitant towards using it because difficulties or technical challenges can arise. Obviously you kind of mentioned that, but was that sort of a big issue, or how did those sort of issues, how quickly were they overcome?
Okay, well, as you can tell by looking at me, I'm a mature male. I'm not good at reading the handbooks before I do things, and I'm a digital migrant rather than a digital native. So I was prone to a lot of the problems that might occur as someone who knows how to teach but doesn't know how to do IT adopts a publisher platform. From my experience, I would say, and I don't often say this about instructional videos, the short videos that Cengage have produced to take you through the journey of producing this, really good. They answer most of the questions. So starting with a blank sheet, scratching my head thinking, how on earth am I going to do this? Which was my situation last June. I found that the suite of short instructional videos worked really well. Didn't answer all of my questions, or I didn't get it all first time. So then selectively using the support from your colleague Roxanne, filled all the gaps. And I guess two of the things I'd be looking for with a publisher platform is, first of all, good instructional videos. Secondly, knowing I've got good backup if I can't figure it out, and I got both of those from Cengage. Can't fault the support. I think a more general tip would be, this platform can be made as bespoke and flexible as you want. So you could simply adopt the resources that are provided by MindTap just en masse, and it would work. You know, the material is a stable platform. It works well. If you then want to develop aspects that suit your own teaching style or deliver the particular flexibilities that you want to achieve, then go for it. I haven't used all of the functions available here by any means. I've just used the bits that supported my work. So yeah, I may have drifted away from the original question there. So please pull me back if I've gone off on a tangent.
It's all been very useful, thank you. And I think you make a good point there. Isn't it? A lot of people can feel that they don't know necessarily where to start. And I think it's just knowing is, you know, if you have a vision of what you would like the course to look like, you know, at Cengage, we've got a support system with the videos or our colleagues in-house that will be able to help you to achieve that vision of how you want it to look. And we can also pull upon the experience of where it's been used and worked well as well. Like, for example, So I guess overall, as we kind of come to a close, is what has been the biggest benefit to you as an instructor using MindTap?
The biggest benefit for me is being able to construct a step-by-step learning path. That I didn't know in advance whether that was going to work. I had a hunch it was what the situation required. The student feedback tells me that it was what was required, and MindTap enabled me to get exactly that in place, and it's paid significant dividends as we've gone on through the year. So, you know, looking at usage of some of these resources and seeing that typically 50% of students are reading the book online. Now, in my previous physical world, at this stage in the year, so we're talking mid-March, we're coming towards the end of the course, maybe 10% of students would have accessed the book. You know, the rest were leaving it for a lot. You know, this feels like we've achieved a step change in engagement, and that's, you know, for me, that's gold dust.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree there as well, and I'm sure many instructors agree with that as well. So maybe just kind of delving down upon the findings from the midterm survey that you did, and feedback, what do you feel has been the biggest benefit to your students and what they've said?
So the biggest benefit, I would say, is in very general terms. Remember, we're talking here about general business school students. I've got to be perfectly honest. For most of them, economics is not their favorite topic. It's a bit of an all-round subject. You know, it's probably good for you, but it's not, you know, it's not the most enjoyable experience. So given that resistance to my topic, you know, as a subject area, finding ways of getting students into exploring it has been a real step forward. This has worked far better than simply talking at students with a little bit of interaction in the big room once a week, and then going through some seminar activities to create a more interactive environment. I think we've got to a more interactive solution for students, despite the fact we're in an online world.
Perfect, thank you. And just being able to just see how that compares, you know, it's different than using a traditional book. So I guess looking forward, are there any recommendations you would make about how you will continue to utilize MindTap for future modules or for other modules?
Yes, so certainly I'm convinced it works well. I've learnt a number of tips and wrinkles to watch out for. So we've improved the process of getting students to register and then use their own individual identity for recording. That's going to be a bit technical, but there are some points there about making sure that students interface with the system in a way that means we can monitor their progress and their assessments. I think as we go forward, so I'm making the assumption that we're not going to be back into large hall lectures next year. I think our our video lecture substitutes will continue to focus down more on students seeing us as instructors use the MindTap materials. So I can imagine building in more of that into our own instructional videos, perhaps showing students that we're using an audio summary or a short video that explains key concepts as a kind of a breakout point, perhaps just a kind of a taster to get just to tantalize students, get them interested in what's available in the MindTap product. I mean, really, who knows where university education is going long term. I guess the payoff for me is that I feel I've got here a platform that is sufficiently flexible that I can adapt it to whatever comes at us next.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. That's already useful. So for really those people that are looking at potentially using MindTap, I think it's been really useful to hear your personal feedback about how it's come about and how it's benefited you as a lecturer, but also as a student. So thank you so much for your comments.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.